Welcome back, Brooklyn Nets fans. So as I said last time I talked to you guys, I was going to make a video, Nets reaction after the 4-game road trip. The Nets go 2-2 on this road trip. I was hoping for 3-1 personally. Well, hoping for 4-0, but just my realistic expectation was 3-1. They go 2-2, and it ended tonight with a very disappointing 136-125 loss at the Timberwolves. There's a lot to talk about with that game tonight, but we'll kind of just go over all these games briefly and just talk about what happened. And some of the recent news and what's going on around the Brooklyn Nets right now. So a night like this, not much good's going on right now, of course. Having lost that game, it's another pretty poorly coached game by Nash, in my opinion, against Minnesota. We had that crazy play where the ref got in the way, and that's kind of got their karma back because in that game versus Washington a couple games ago, David Vanterpool, the assistant coach for the Nets, hits that ball while it's in play, and Nets get the extra possession out of it. But then tonight, Minnesota threw a ball out of bounds. Well, it should have been. Then it hit a ref and stayed in, and it led to a Taurean Prince three-pointer of all people. So, the Nets kind of got their karma with that one. But tonight was just annoying because they couldn't stop Karl Anthony Towns. Steve Nash's rotations at the end were garbage, putting in James Johnson over Deron Sharp, having Aldridge not play well the entire night. Just the officiating, I hate to blame that. It just didn't feel fair. Minnesota shot like 16 or 18 more free throws than the Nets this game. So stuff like that was frustrating, but there's a lot to talk about. So if you guys enjoy this video, leave a like, it would help a lot, and let's get into it. So first off, I just want to talk about how important these road games are with Kevin Durant out. Now, the Nets, of course, are in this unique situation where Kyrie Irving can't play home games. It still makes absolutely no sense to me, but he can't. That's just the way it is right now. So these games when Kyrie and Harden can play together, it's magnified, and it's more important because now I'm really concerned about these Nets home games coming up because with just James Harden, who's been very inconsistent lately, like the game against the Spurs looked like the vintage James Harden from Houston. Then tonight looked like the most, disinterested, wasn't trying on defense. All he did was go to the rim and beg for fouls, wasn't getting them. Bad shooting night once again. It's not consistent with James Harden. It's frustrating. He has those nights where he looks like the old James Harden, has those nights where he looks like the very much declining James Harden. But anyway, these road games for Brooklyn are so important with Kevin Durant out because now the Nets have to go home and play teams like the Lakers and the Nuggets on back-to-back nights. And I know the Lakers are not that great right now, but the Nuggets are a team I very much respect, even without Murray. But playing back-to-back at home with just James Harden and all these, quote-unquote role guys, it's going to be a tough ask for this Nets team to win both games for sure, but I'm just hoping for 1-1. Like, that's basically what my hope is at this point as a Nets fan, just to split those games for this mini homestand and then they go back on the road again. But these home games with James Harden and no other superstars it's not where I want to be. I'm just kind of preparing for the worst. I don't know what to expect. There's not enough offense, not enough shooting, clearly, without Kyrie Irving on the floor, and you're asking for a whole lot from Patty Mills. And I'm not saying it's impossible for the Nets to win with that team, but just if you get the bad version of James Harden, it's not going to go well at all. It's going to be a very ugly, multiple double-digit point losses and things like that. James Harden has to be, scoring 30-plus points pretty efficiently, dishing out 12 to 15 assists and getting his rebounds. Like, that's going to have to happen for the Nets to compete in these games coming up here. And James Harden, for a lot of his Houston career, he did have Dwight Howard, had Chris Paul, had Russ, but for the most part, he was that guy in Houston, was able to kind of orchestrate everything. That's what he did. But can James Harden do that at 32, 33 years old on the Brooklyn Nets? Not consistently, that's for sure. So that's a concern of mine, how going 2-2 on this road trip was not ideal. I wanted 3-1 because, coming into tonight, they were the first seed, but everything is so bunched up in the top 5, top 6, so they'll probably drop now into like 3 or 4 at this point. But anyway, it's just these games are so magnified when Kyrie and Harden play together. You have to take advantage of these games. You have to get the wins. I know that Minnesota was favored tonight. They're a very tough matchup for the Nets. They're a team that has length. They're physical, can out-rebound us. Points in the paint were a problem. The turnovers tonight were a problem. So I get why Minnesota was favored, but the Nets have to find a way to win a game like this. And this was a winnable game. Up until that point when the ref hit that ball, the Nets were very much in the game. It was a 4-point game, I believe. I think it was like 1-0. The score was 102-106 with 9:30 left in the fourth quarter. So let's say the ball does get thrown out of bounds. Obviously, it's a game of momentum. That's kind of how basketball is. And let's say the Timberwolves throw that ball out of bounds. who knows what would have happened from there on out. You still have 9.5 minutes left, basically an entire quarter. The Nets would have been down 4 points with the ball, but instead, the ref keeps the ball in, and Taurean Prince makes it a 7-point game instead of 4. So just things like that can change the entire, complexity of a game. So those things suck, and it is what it is. As I said, the Nets got their karma because it happened in Washington in our favor this time. It hurts us. So I think even Sarah Kustok dropped the S word on air. I think I heard that. She was like, "You got to be bleeping me." So I never heard her speak like that before, but that was pretty interesting. Even Steve Nash tonight, I must say, was very animated on the sideline for the first time in forever, really. Like, Steve Nash, I guess, sometimes has his moments of showing frustration, but tonight especially, like, you can see him kind of just cursing out the refs, and I was happy about it. At one point, I wanted Steve Nash to get a technical because, like, things were going so far in Minnesota's favor with the officiating, where I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, someone's got to step up and say something. I think James Harden got a technical at one point for getting in the face of somebody on a box out. There was kind of some chippiness going on there, but, Steve Nash, I felt like this would have been a perfect night for him to just kind of fire up his team and get a technical, but didn't happen, of course. It's not really who Steve Nash is, but would have been a perfect night. And I don't want to harp on the officiating, of course, but just some of the calls that Karl-Anthony Towns was getting was just kind of crazy. He would go, to his left side, kind of bump a guy, fade away, and he was getting those type of calls. It was like ticky-tack, type calls, and I just was not a fan of it, you know what I mean? And then you have a guy like James Harden who was clearly getting hit. There was one play, I think, with Kessler Edwards where it might have been Deron Sharp, I forget, but one of the Nets players went for a dunk or a layup, clearly got slapped on the wrist. There was no call. It's just, it kind of bothered me, of course. So the Nets, of course, coming in this game as underdogs, you can't really have the refs be against you as well. So that was a tough pill to swallow there, of course, and towards the end of the fourth quarter, it did not go our way. Minnesota started to pull away very easily, and that was my next point. I wanted to get to Steve Nash and his rotation. So LaMarcus Aldridge, after an awful night, I think Aldridge, I'll just go over his stats real quick. He must have shot terribly in this game. Aldridge shot 3 for 8 in this game, only 6 points. It's not like terrible, but it's not a regular LaMarcus Aldridge type night. He just clearly was off in this game. And instead of Steve Nash going from LaMarcus Aldridge to a bigger guy to help help mitigate Karl-Anthony Towns, who is a 6'11", 7-foot, really good scoring big man, the Nets go with James Johnson, who is like 6'8", 6'9", probably, and it obviously was a mismatch from the start. They put Cat in the post on the first play against James Johnson, get a foul. I think Cat got fouled the next possession as well. And I'm sitting there saying, like, why the hell is Deron Sharp not playing? Deron Sharp was, like, actually the one Net that was actually having a positive influence on the game tonight. Looking at the plus minuses right now, Deron Sharp was a +8. Everybody else had a minus. Edwards was a -10, Mills -18, Irving -12, Harden -14. And you have Deron Sharp, the one guy who, when he was in there, the team was playing well, and you put James Johnson, who's mostly a small forward, power forward throughout his career, over the center and Deron Sharp. That made no sense to me. Like, Steve Nash kind of just effed us over right there with that coaching decision. And I understand, like, wanting to go small and all that, but, like, Minnesota has a lot more length than the Brooklyn Nets. And for us to just go small and expect that to work against a Karl-Anthony Towns, it was a flawed plan, and Cat had a field day in the latter portions of the fourth quarter. So I don't blame the entire loss on Steve Nash. There's a lot of issues with this roster that are out of Steve Nash's control. The Nets clearly only have like 2 shooters, maybe 3. We have Kyrie, who's a spot-up guy when he needs to be. Patty Mills, of course, catch-and-shoot guy. Kessler Edwards. I don't consider James Harden a catch-and-shoot type guy. So there's not many offensive options. Like, when you have to play Bruce Brown and James Johnson and Blake Griffin and who else am I forgetting? DeAndre Bembry, who I thought actually had a pretty good night. But, like, just shooting-wise, like, those type of guys are similar players when it comes to offensive threats and spot-up shooters. It's just defenses don't respect those guys, and for good reason. Like, I saw Blake Griffin made a 3-pointer tonight, but his season percentage is awful. Obviously, Bembry's not respected as a 3-point shooter in the NBA. So, yeah, it's just things like that where I can't exactly put all the blame on Steve Nash because, yes, you don't have a lot of shooters. It's hard to generate much offense here, but it wasn't just the offense. The Nets' defense was atrocious in a game like this, giving up 136 points in regulation. Minnesota in this game had 11 steals to our 4. They had 7 blocks compared to our 1 block. So that's just it right there. I mean, there were so many just careless turnovers. Like, Kyrie and James Harden combined for 9 turnovers in this game. Even LaMarcus Aldridge somehow had 4. I don't know how the hell that happened, but Some of James Harden's passes in this game were just inexcusable, just those lazy bounce passes that were easily going to be intercepted and went the other way for easy points. So they kind of beat themselves tonight. There's a lot of things. It's, Steve Nash's terrible decision to play James Johnson, the officiating, the Nets not taking care of the ball, the Nets having trouble shooting, of course. And they put up 125. It wasn't like the worst offensive game, but you can tell the spacing on the floor is not there right now. And for James Harden, a guy who greatly benefits from spacing on the floor, having shooters around him, that's how Houston built their team, having guys like Eric Gordon and those type of guys, Gerald Green when he could shoot around him, even Austin Rivers, guys like that. Put those guys around James Harden to open up the floor. I forgot Trevor Ariza. You get what I mean. So putting shooters around James Harden, stretching the floor out, making it easier for a guy like Harden to get past his guy and get an uncontested layup. That can't happen on this team right now because who the hell respects Blake Griffin's jump shot? Who respects Bembry's jump shot? James Johnson? It just wasn't possible with a lineup like this. So when James Harden went to his left, tried to drive to the basket, a lot of times he had to push off, and a lot of times when he did push off, the defender would just grab the ball and run out of bounds with it, and it would just be the Nets ball under the basket. So, James Harden did not have much success driving to the basket in this game, and that's kind of how it's been for some of these games because of the lack of spacing. And I do hope when Joe Harris comes back, when Kevin Durant comes back, those problems will be solved, but as Nets fans, we don't get anything nice, of course, and those guys can't play together. It seems like every time someone comes back, just 2 or 3 games later, someone's out. So, it always seems like something goes wrong with this team, and it's just very frustrating. That's pretty much all I can say. And while we're kind of on the topic of Deron Sharp, I must say, I love what I've seen this year from him. I said in my last video, I literally had zero expectations for Deron Sharp to have a significant role on this team this year, so my expectations were very low. But with Deron Sharp, I have been very impressed. There's things I really like about the guy. His rebounding, boxing out's very good. Contesting shots sometimes, but what I must get to is the fouling he does. He fouls way too much. And I do think it's something mental. Like, he'll figure it out eventually. I just think maybe in college they call things differently. So there's just an adjustment period right now for Deron Sharp. Even LaMarcus Aldridge kind of made a joke about how much he fouls in a post game, I think, after that. I think it was after the Wizards game, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, it's just Deron Sharp, he has times where he's in there for like 6 or 7 minutes and has like 3 or 4 fouls. And you're like, you just can't have that. So a guy like Deron, when he's in there, he makes a positive impact. We know that he could finish at the basket, contest shots, rebound very well, pass the ball very well for a big man. He helps his team a lot. But when you're in there and you're fouling at an uncontrollable level, it's just you can't play that man 35 minutes a game because he's just fouling way too much. And I do think it can be fixed. I think a lot of his problem is he kind of checks guys with his hip. Like, I do think he understands the verticality of being straight up, but a lot of times when a guy's going for a layup, he'll just kind of hip check him. He did that to Karl-Anthony Towns on an and-one early in this game. Just things like that, like just not using his body correctly. He understands the verticality, Deron Sharp, but it's just using that body is like, that's where he gets in trouble. So I do think that will be coached out of him, but unfortunately right now he's just not playable for an entire game because of the foul trouble. So I do think in a situation like tonight's game where LaMarcus Aldridge is the one who fouls out and you have 6 or 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you are playing against the Karl-Anthony Towns, a very talented big man scorer, that should have been the opportunity for Deron Sharp to go in there, but Steve Nash had other ideas going with James Johnson. So I still don't understand the thinking behind that one, but it was pretty frustrating, of course. Now, I haven't talked about Kyrie Irving much as an individual, and I must say I'm super impressed. He's still that same ridiculously talented player that can get to any spot he wants to. His transition finishes are unbelievable. Kyrie Irving is mesmerizing to watch as a basketball player, and it's just a shame that he's basically taken away from us from home games, which I still think is the dumbest thing ever. Like, how do unvaccinated away players play at Barclays, but the guy on the home team can't play? It's just a double standard. It makes no sense to me, but I don't want this to get political and all that crap, but it seems very unfair, I must say. So, but with Kyrie, when he's out there, the Nets are just such a different team. Like, it helps them so much. You're not relying on James Harden to dribble the ball 95% of the time. You could put the ball in Kyrie Irving's hands on the wing. He can get by his guy and dump off a nice pass, which he did a few times tonight. He can pull up anywhere basically and knock down a shot. I mean, Kyrie has been so great at some points. Like, he in that game, I think against Washington, I think it was. Maybe, no, it was a Spurs game. I'm sorry. In the fourth quarter in the Spurs game when they won 117-102 on the road in San Antonio a few nights ago, Kyrie Irving was on a tear in the fourth quarter. Even in the Cleveland game, his return back to Cleveland, not the first time, but one of his returns back to Cleveland. That was a tough loss, of course, for the Nets last Monday afternoon, Martin Luther King Day. But, Kyrie in that game was just awesome in the third quarter, even early fourth quarter. Like, Kyrie was just going off and putting the Nets on his back. And that Cleveland game, it still irks me. That's a game they probably should have won. Obviously, Garland's a great player. The big men were hurting us as expected. But that game, the way it ended, how James Harden threw that bounce pass in the backcourt and it went out of bounds, the Nets kind of beat themselves in that situation right there. So, this team has its flaws. It's definitely, the Nets, looking at most betting sites, are the favorites to win the NBA Finals, which is great news. But as a Nets fan, I don't expect to win the Finals. It's a bad feeling because I just know something's going to go wrong here. And hopefully I can play that clip back and make an ass out of myself. But just something always goes wrong with this Nets team. They were favorites by a mile to win the championship last year. 2 out of 3 guys get hurt. The big 3 gets hurt. So I can't expect things to go perfectly. Joe Harris's rehab has gone, it's like the Nets are such a mystery when it comes to their injuries. The Nets don't really reveal too much with injuries, but every time they ask about Joe Harris, it's like, oh, he's progressing nicely. And then a week later, it's like, oh, there's a bit of an irritation, bit of a setback. We'll see. Like, I don't know when Joe Harris is coming back at this point. Obviously, I miss Joe. I think he's actually a very vital part of this team. We've realized this now because Joe Harris, we always, he never missed games really in the past. He might have had one instance where he turned an ankle a couple years ago and missed some games. But this is like the longest stretch that Joe Harris has been out for that I could remember since he's been on this team for the last 5 years or so. So with Joe being out, we now get to see what do the Brooklyn Nets look like without Joe Harris, and it's not a version of the Nets that I like seeing. It's an offense that doesn't have the spacing, doesn't have one of the best three-point shooters on the floor, and Joe Harris can put the ball on the floor and kind of set up for others or finish at the rim. Like, Joe Harris does a lot for this team, and it's just a shame that we can't see him on the floor, and obviously Kevin Durant's going to be out, so I would assume till early March. We'll see, of course, but I don't expect them to rush him back. The playoffs start in late April most times. It's probably when it starts this year, I'm sure, so they're not going to rush him back. But I am concerned going forward. I must say, I don't think the Nets are in jeopardy of missing the playoffs. I'm not going to go that far. But, in terms of being, top half of the East, I have my questions. Looking at the standings right now, the Nets are in second place by half a game behind Miami, who just beat the Lakers tonight, actually. But there is basically, the 6th seed Sixers right now are only a game and a half behind. They're 2 games behind us. They're 2 games behind us. So, if we slip up without Kevin Durant and Joe Harris, it's we're going to be in the 6 or 7 seed very soon. I don't see us getting below the Boston Celtics level or even maybe even the Hornets, but there will come a point this year, I feel where the Nets might slip up a bit with, Kyrie Irving not playing home games and James Harden being alone for home games. There may come a point where the Nets lose 4 out of 5 games or something, and we have to kind of just accept the fact that we don't have the firepower right now to compete with some of these better teams in this Eastern Conference that is now good somehow. It's been the Western Conference. And my entire basketball fandom life, the Western Conference has always ruled, but now, of course, the Eastern Conference is very good. So, I don't see us falling that low in the standings, but I could see a world where the Brooklyn Nets are maybe the 6 or 7 seed in 3 or 4 weeks. It's possible. I don't want it to be the case, but things are so bunched up right now at the top, and a team like Miami, I don't think has major injuries. I know the Bulls had a scare with Zach LaVine, but he's fine, I believe. The Bucks, of course, are pretty healthy right now. The Cavs are looking good. Sixers, Joel Embiid's playing like an MVP or the MVP right now. So, they're in good spots. And us, we're kind of just out here running on fumes and just looking for anybody to come off the bench or looking for one of our 20 or 19-year-old rookies to help us win games. And it's crazy. So the Nets are just in not an ideal spot right now. And if we do drop to the 6 or 7 seed, it's not going to shock me. We're still going to make the playoffs. I get that, of course. But that funny question comes up as Brooklyn Nets fans is, do we almost benefit from playing on the road first? If the Nets are below a 5 seed or below, they're going to play road games in the playoffs the first 2 games, and they're going to have 4 road games and 3 home games because that's, of course, the advantage that the home team gets in the playoffs. They get 1 more home game if it goes to a game 7. So if the Nets are the road team in the playoffs, the first 2 games will be on the road, and Kyrie Irving can play in those games unless they play the Knicks or the Raptors, I believe, which Kyrie cannot play in those areas. So, maybe it is a good thing for the Brooklyn Nets to be below a 5 seed. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I'm not counting on that being the case, but I am, aware that this team may struggle in the near future, especially if James Harden is not playing at a high level. So that's the unfortunate reality. I'm not expecting to, miss the playoffs. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen. I doubt that, but I could see a world where the Nets kind of fall a bit in the standings because these teams that are below us and right on our tail are a lot more healthy right now and are in a much better spot as well. So that's pretty much all I got for the Timberwolves game tonight. I mean, the officiating was kind of sus, not going to lie. But the Nets did beat themselves in a lot of areas, just their stupid turnovers from James Harden and just being careless with the basketball at some points, the lack of communication on defense and making things way too easy for certain guys. D'Angelo Russell had a nice game. Even Taurean Prince made his shots, and Karl Anthony Towns had his way in the fourth quarter. So it happens. The Nets were, once again, underdogs for a reason. I get that, of course. So we'll go over some of the future schedule here. So the Nets have a quick 2-game homestand on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday's the Lakers, who I mentioned are kind of struggling right now, and you have the Nuggets on Wednesday. So my hope is that we split those games. I don't expect to go 2-0. It'd be great, but I just don't see that being the case right now. I don't expect to beat Denver on the second half of a back-to-back. I mean, maybe something crazy happens there, but it's not looking like the most likely outcome. I'll put it that way. So we have that. Then we start another road trip. So this time we're out west. So I think it's a 5-game road trip. So next Saturday it's at the Warriors, then it's at the Suns, at the Kings, at the Jazz, at the Nuggets. So they will get 5 games on the road here. So next 5 out of 7 games are on the road. Kyrie Irving can play in those games. So my problem is, though, can the Nets survive in these next 2 games where it's home games and just James Harden and no Durant, no Kyrie, no Joe Harris? Like, that's a concern I have, of course. Maybe Nick Claxton comes back by that point. It seems like he's getting closer to returning with the hamstring issue, but we'll see, of course. But it's not like Nick Claxton's going to fill the shoes of a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, so it's not going to help that much. But we'll see. I mean, I'm a little concerned, of course, about this team and the state they're currently at. I do hope that by April, things are in place, guys are back healthy, we're playing at a very high level. We'll see the big 3. Obviously, Kyrie Irving and the whole vaccination thing around New York is a big dark cloud over this franchise right now. But just if we get Durant back, Harris back, still have Harden, I think we'll be in a pretty good spot. Even if we have Kyrie just for road games, it's better than nothing. So that'll pretty much do it. As I record this, the Nets are in second place, so that's fine, but once again, I just don't know how much longer we can hold on to that with a tough schedule coming up here with some tough Western Conference opponents. So we'll find out, though. I think next time I'll talk to you guys, I'll try to do a video after the Nuggets game because I feel like a lot can happen in these next 2 games, and there's like a 3-day layoff from Wednesday to Saturday. So I'll probably make a video on like Thursday night, maybe if they win the Nuggets game, I'll do a reaction Wednesday night, but probably Thursday night. Count on my next Nets video being. So I'll talk to you guys then. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys next time.